After nearly 70 years of captivating audiences with his velvety voice and timeless love songs, Johnny Mathis, the man who gave us classics like Misty, Chances Are, and It's Not For Me to Say, is finally saying goodbye. At 89 years old, the legendary crooner has announced that he will be stepping away from live performances for good after a heartbreaking health update that has left fans around the world in tears. For decades, Mathis has been a symbol of elegance and romance in American music, a performer whose voice could silence a room and stir emotions like few others. From the moment he signed with Columbia Records in 1956, he seemed unstoppable, racking up gold records, Grammy nominations, and a permanent place in the hearts of millions. His concerts weren't just performances, they were memories, filled with warmth, nostalgia, and that effortless charm that made him a living legend. But now, time has caught up with the man whose voice once sounded eternal. Mathis has revealed that he's been struggling with age-related memory issues, and his doctors have advised him to slow down. In an emotional statement, he admitted that performing has become increasingly difficult, and that his mind doesn't always keep up with the music anymore. Though the exact diagnosis remains private, his words carried a heartbreaking finality, a soft farewell from one of music's most enduring voices. His final tour, appropriately titled The Voice of Romance, Farewell Tour, will end in May 2025. After that, Johnny plans to retreat from the spotlight, spending his days surrounded by family, music, and memories of a life that defined an era. For his fans, this isn't just the end of a career, it's the closing of a golden chapter in music history. It's been wonderful, wonderful, Mathis said in his farewell message, a touching nod to the song that first made him famous, and a perfect goodbye from a man who turned every lyric into poetry. Long before he became a legend, Johnny Mathis was just a young dreamer from San Francisco, a boy with a gift so pure that even his earliest songs seemed touched by something divine. Born in 1935 to a large, hard-working family, Johnny's life was far from glamorous. He grew up in a small home where money was scarce, but music was everywhere. His father, Clem Mathis, recognized his son's rare talent early on and built him a makeshift stage out of wooden planks in the backyard. It was there, surrounded by the hum of the city and the warmth of family, that Johnny Mathis first learned the power of a song. By the time he was a teenager, his voice had become his destiny. He trained with a local voice teacher, mastering classical techniques that would later make his singing sound effortless and smooth. At one point, he even considered becoming an Olympic athlete. He was an accomplished high jumper and hurdler at San Francisco State College. But fate had other plans. When Columbia Records producer George Avakian heard him perform at a small nightclub in 1955, he immediately signed him. The very next year, Mathis was in New York recording what would become one of the most romantic collections in pop history. His rise was meteoric. In 1957, songs like It's Not For Me to Say and Chances Are made Johnny Mathis a household name. His gentle vibrato and flawless phrasing gave him a sound unlike anyone else. While rock and roll was dominating the airwaves, Mathis stood apart, elegant, restrained, and timeless. He wasn't loud or rebellious. He was sincere, a voice of love and longing that seemed to transcend the times. By the late 1950s, his greatest hits album became one of the best-selling records in history, staying on the Billboard Top 200 chart for over 490 weeks, a record that stood for decades. Songs like Misty, Wonderful, Wonderful, and The 12th of Never became eternal staples of weddings, anniversaries, and quiet nights around the world. Mathis had achieved what few artists ever do. He became not just a singer, but a symbol of romance itself. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, his popularity never faded. He adapted gracefully as music changed, recording duets with stars like Denise Williams and Dionne Warwick, and even venturing into jazz, soul, and Broadway. His 1978 hit, Too Much, Too Little, Too Late, shot to #1, proving that even after 2 decades, Johnny Mathis could still touch the hearts of new generations. Yet, behind his effortless charm and unshakable professionalism, there was always humility. He never flaunted his fame, never chased trends, and never forgot the discipline his father had taught him. Mathis's peers admired him not just for his talent, but for his integrity. He stayed out of scandals and avoided controversy, focusing solely on his craft. "I've always believed that music is bigger than ego," he once said. "You don't perform to be worshipped. You perform to give something beautiful to the world." As decades passed, that beauty endured. While others retired, Johnny continued to tour, performing hundreds of shows well into his 80s. Fans marveled that his voice had hardly changed. Still silken, still flawless, still capable of making a room fall silent with a single note. Critics often remarked that time seemed to respect him, as if age itself hesitated to touch his gift. But behind the bright lights and standing ovations, Mathis began to sense the quiet toll of time. Rehearsals took longer. Lyrics that once came instantly to mind sometimes slipped away. He brushed it off at first, chalking it up to exhaustion or age. But deep down, he knew something was changing. "I've always been able to feel the music," he told a close friend. "But lately I've started to feel something else, stillness where memory used to live." It was the beginning of a realization that would eventually lead him to the decision that broke millions of hearts, to step away from the stage that had defined his entire life. But before he said goodbye, the world would see one last glimpse of Johnny Mathis doing what he loved most, pouring his soul into every song, one note at a time. For most of his life, Johnny Mathis seemed untouched by time. His voice, pure, tender, and endlessly romantic, carried through the decades as if it belonged to another world, one immune to age. Fans would marvel at how, even in his 80s, he could glide effortlessly through a song like Misty or Chances Are, with the same emotional precision that first made him famous in the 1950s. But behind the calm grace of his performances, subtle changes were beginning to unfold, changes that would quietly alter the course of his extraordinary career. It began in small, almost unnoticeable ways. During rehearsals, Johnny sometimes forgot the order of his set list or mixed up verses of songs he'd sung thousands of times before. His longtime musical director, Gil Rigers, initially brushed it off. "We all have off days," he'd say with a smile. But over time, the lapses grew more frequent. During one concert in 2023, fans noticed Johnny paused mid-performance, looking momentarily lost before softly laughing and saying, "Sometimes the memories come and go faster than the music." The audience applauded warmly, unaware that it was more than a passing joke. Johnny's friends and family became concerned. He had always been meticulous about his routines: morning exercises, vocal warm-ups, long walks, and carefully planned meals. Yet even these habits began to waver. Close friends described moments where he'd forget appointments or repeat stories within minutes. For a man who had always relied on his memory to recall not only lyrics but decades of touring details, it was disorienting. Medical consultations soon followed. After months of quiet tests and evaluations, the doctors gave him the news he had long feared. His memory issues were accelerating. Though they didn't use the word dementia, they explained that the symptoms were consistent with mild cognitive decline, a condition that can gradually affect speech, focus, and recall. For Johnny, whose life had been built around precision and presence, it was a devastating revelation. Still, his first instinct was to keep it private. He didn't want sympathy, and he certainly didn't want to alarm his fans. "I've always believed that music should lift people up," he said. "I never wanted my songs to be a reminder of sadness." But as the condition progressed, hiding it became impossible. His team began to notice more strain during rehearsals, lyrics taped discreetly to the stage, longer breaks between songs, and increasing fatigue after shows. Then, during his Voice of Romance tour in late 2024, the truth became undeniable. During a show in Las Vegas, Johnny began singing "The 12th of Never," a song he'd performed for over 60 years. Halfway through, he stopped, looked at the orchestra, and softly said, "I'm sorry, I just can't remember the next line." The audience fell silent. After a brief pause, he smiled and whispered, "Maybe I've sung it enough to last a lifetime." The crowd erupted in applause, not out of pity, but out of love. That night, after the concert, Johnny made his decision. He would finish the tour, but not book any more performances afterward. It was time to say goodbye. "I never wanted to fade away on stage," he told his manager. "I want people to remember the voice, not the forgetting." When his retirement announcement came in early 2025, the response was overwhelming. Fans from every generation, from those who grew up with his records in the 50s to younger listeners who discovered his music through streaming, flooded social media with messages of gratitude and sorrow. "You were the soundtrack to our love story," one fan wrote. "There will never be another voice like yours." In his official statement, Johnny remained humble and graceful, thanking his audience for a lifetime of listening ears and open hearts. He acknowledged that his memory had begun to fail him, but added, "The music will always live in my heart, even if some of it escapes my mind." Behind closed doors, the decision brought him a sense of peace. He no longer had to fight against the limits of time or the fear of forgetting words he'd spent his life perfecting. "Every singer knows when the last note has been sung," he said quietly. "And I think I've just reached mine." For fans, it was a heartbreaking moment, watching a legend who had given the world so much beauty finally confront the one thing even his music couldn't conquer: time itself. But Johnny Mathis faced it the same way he faced everything else, with grace, honesty, and an unshakable love for the art that defined his life. When Johnny Mathis announced that his Voice of Romance farewell tour would be his final series of performances, it sent a wave of emotion through the entertainment world. Fans who had followed his career for decades knew this moment would eventually come, but few were truly prepared to say goodbye. For many, Mathis wasn't just a singer. He was the soundtrack of a lifetime, the voice that played during weddings, anniversaries, and quiet Sunday mornings. Now, that voice was preparing to take its final bow. Each stop of the farewell tour carried an air of reverence. Audiences weren't there merely to hear the hits. They came to honor the man who had carried the torch of romance through generations. In Los Angeles, the lights dimmed as Mathis walked slowly onto the stage, his signature smile in place, a soft, golden glow surrounding him. As the orchestra began the opening notes of "Chances Are," there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. His voice, though softer and a bit more fragile than in his prime, still carried that unmistakable warmth, the kind that could melt away the years in an instant. Backstage, Johnny's team worked tirelessly to make sure everything ran smoothly. His longtime musical director, Gil Rigers, often helped him review the set list, gently prompting him before each performance. "He doesn't want sympathy," Rigers said in one interview. "He wants to give people a memory they'll never forget. Even now, every note he sings is filled with love." The emotional peak came during his final shows in early 2025 in New York City. At the same venue where he had first performed more than 60 years earlier, Mathis gave what many called one of the most moving performances of his life. Between songs, he paused to reflect. "When I started singing, I was just a kid who wanted to make people feel something," he said. "And here you are, all these years later, still listening. You've made my life a dream." As the orchestra played Wonderful, Wonderful, the very song that launched his career in 1957, the audience rose to their feet. Couples held hands, friends embraced, and some simply closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them one last time. Johnny's voice trembled slightly, but his emotion filled every corner of the hall. When the final note faded, the applause lasted for nearly 10 minutes. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered into the microphone, "Thank you for letting me sing for you." Behind the scenes, the weight of the farewell took its toll. Johnny had always been deeply private, but those close to him say he felt both sadness and relief. "He's proud," one family member shared. "He's grateful that he can still say goodbye on his own terms. But it breaks his heart to know he won't be on that stage anymore." In his final public interview before retiring, Mathis spoke with his signature gentleness. "I've had a beautiful life," he said. "The applause, the music, the friends, it's all more than I ever dreamed of. Now I just want to rest, take walks, and remember the good times. If I forget a few things along the way, that's okay. I'll always remember the feeling. That feeling of timeless beauty and grace is what Johnny leaves behind. Even as his memory fades, his songs remain immortal. His voice still plays across radio waves, streaming services, and the hearts of millions who grew up with him. Misty will still make people slow dance. The 12th of Never will still remind lovers that some emotions never end. The final curtain came down in May 2025 during his last show in San Francisco, his hometown, as the final chords of When a Child is Born echoed through the theater. Johnny looked up, closed his eyes, and said softly, "That's all." "My friends!" The crowd erupted in applause, many chanting his name, unwilling to let the moment end. It wasn't just the end of a concert. It was the end of an era. After the lights dimmed and the stage fell silent, Mathis walked off for the last time, his family waiting backstage with open arms. He smiled, saying quietly, "Now I can finally rest." And with that, the man whose music defined love itself stepped gracefully into retirement, leaving behind not just melodies, but memories that will echo for generations to come. After the final curtain fell on his farewell tour, Johnny Mathis slipped quietly out of the public eye, just as he had lived most of his life, with grace, humility, and quiet dignity. For a man who spent nearly 7 decades in the glow of the spotlight, retirement was both unfamiliar and strangely peaceful. "It's odd," he told a close friend not long after his final concert, "to wake up and not have somewhere to sing, but maybe it's time to let the music rest, and let life sing instead." Now, in his serene California home, surrounded by lush gardens and sunlight, Mathis enjoys the simple pleasures that fame once kept him from fully experiencing. Mornings begin with a cup of tea on his porch overlooking the hills. He still hums softly, fragments of melodies that come and go, sometimes pausing mid-tune with a small smile when a lyric slips from memory. For Johnny, forgetting isn't painful anymore. It's simply part of the rhythm of growing old. Family and a few close friends form his quiet circle. His nieces and nephews visit often, filling the house with laughter and stories. "He's happiest when we play his old records," one family member shared. Sometimes he'll close his eyes and say, "That boy could sing." Then he laughs, realizing it's him. Those moments remind everyone around him that no matter what memory fades, his spirit remains as vibrant as ever. He still keeps a small studio space, not for recording, but for reflection. Inside are photos, gold records, and letters from fans spanning decades. There's a note from Barbra Streisand, a framed photo with Ray Charles, and even a worn program from his first concert in 1956. Each item tells a story, and when he can't quite recall the details, his assistant reads aloud from the journal he kept over the years. It's a tender ritual, revisiting a lifetime of music through his own written words. Friends describe his days as peaceful, even joyful. "He's not sad," said his longtime pianist, Gil Rigers. "He knows he's lived a full life. He talks about the people he met, the places he's seen, and how lucky he was to make a living doing something he loved. Every time we visit, he still hums the chorus of 'Wonderful! Wonderful!' like it's the first time." Though his health remains fragile, Johnny stays active when he can. Gentle walks through his garden, a bit of yoga, and an occasional swim. His doctors encouraged these routines to keep his mind and body strong. Music was his heartbeat, one physician noted. Now nature and family are. Despite stepping away from public performances, Mathis's influence continues to thrive. Tributes pour in from artists across generations: Michael Bublé, Tony Bennett's family, and even younger pop stars who credit him for shaping the sound of modern balladry. A new tribute album titled Forever Johnny is being produced, featuring his greatest songs reimagined by today's singers. Johnny has heard early clips and, according to those close to him, smiled and said, "As long as someone's still singing love songs, my work isn't done." On special occasions, Mathis still visits his piano, not to perform, but to remember. His fingers move softly over the keys, sometimes pausing, sometimes forgetting, but always finding their way back to a melody. Music, he once said, isn't about remembering every note. It's about remembering how it made you feel. Even in retirement, Johnny remains a symbol of timeless grace, a reminder that legacy isn't measured in fame, but in the feelings we leave behind. His songs continue to play on radios, streaming playlists, and in the hearts of those who fell in love to his voice. He may no longer stand on a stage, but his presence lingers everywhere music still matters. As the sun sets over his California hillside, Johnny often sits quietly, gazing at the horizon. He's lived through generations of change, from vinyl to streaming, from black and white TV to digital concerts. And through it all, his message never changed. Love, hope, and beauty endure. When friends ask if he misses performing, he smiles and says, "Every day, but now I sing in my head." And that's enough. And for millions of fans around the world, the echo of his voice, soft, golden, eternal, will always be enough.